This time we're trying to explain the UK licensing laws. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. The AM or moped licence. So you've just turned 16 and you want to ride the mighty highways and byways of our green and pleasant land, because you've more than had your fill of ride the push bike, or worse still, public transport. So for that first vital taste of freedom, all you need is some L plates and a moped. Well, of course, it's never that simple, is it? You'll need your provisional licence and you have to complete your CBT, or compulsory basic training. The CBT takes all day and you start with cone work before going out onto the road and doing some training on the road also. And then it's freedom at last. You're out on the road, all on your lonesome. But what is a moped? Originally mopeds were motorcycles with pedals. But today a modern moped is a vehicle that's restricted to 45 km an hour, about 28 miles an hour. A moped must be under 50cc, but it can have either gears or automatic. So some mopeds are scooters and some are geared motorcycles. This does cause some confusion because some people assume that all scooters happen to be mopeds, although some are of course much larger. And this can cause a bit of friction really. People come up to you when you've got a maxi scooter and say, "Oh, nice moped," more than a little frustrating when you've shelled a fortune out on a 500cc monster. I've no doubt the moped law was something created by somebody who'd never sat on two wheels in his entire life. Why anybody would think that a vehicle that can't keep up with the general flow of traffic is in some way safe completely mystifies me, I have to say. For me, the poor performance of these vehicles actually increases the level of risk every time you take one out for a ride, because there's a tendency when riding to somehow edge towards the gutter, towards the side of the road, and that's never a safe place to be. And the emission regulations of the past few decades have gradually resulted in the phasing out of two-strokes, and so, geared or otherwise, most modern mopeds run four-stroke engines. This may mean they're more fuel efficient, but it also means they're rather more sluggish, and in general the old two-stroke engines are lighter and livelier. You definitely get more bang for your buck from a little two-stroke engine. For me, it's really not worth taking your full licence at this point, because you're still going to be strapped to a moped, so it's best to hold out, because better things are just round the corner at 17. The A1 or light motorcycle licence. So now you're 17 and you can finally hit the road as a provisional car licence driver. And you can pass your test and transport all your rowdy friends. Or you can get yourself a 125, whether it be an automatic scooter, a classic 125, geared or non-geared, and of course a modern sporty little number. The choice for 125s is wide and varied. Now your CBT will carry you over from the moped the previous year, but if you haven't got that you're going to need to do the CBT, so it's back around the cones and on the road. But if your CBT does run out from your moped years, there's cones and road work once again. But that done, you're on your own with your very own 125 motorcycle. For me, this is where your motorbike journey really starts. A 125 is a much more capable vehicle than a moped, by which I mean, of course, faster and more powerful. Now whether geared or automatic, the power of a 125 will range usually between around 9.5 and 15 horsepower, with top speeds ranging between 65 and around 85 miles an hour. A decently powerful sports model like Tom's old Dalem is capable of cruising around 60 miles an hour, but you've got to work the gearbox pretty hard to keep those things spinning. Show 'em a hill or headwind and your speed drops off rapidly. So my advice, if some smug git on a bigger bike says riding 125s is easy, I'd give him a swift kick in the nuts. But on the bright side, at least you can make the odd overtaking manoeuvre. It will definitely pay to plan ahead though, and you're going to have to work the thing hard to get by. Make no doubt, riding a 125 at speed is hard work, for both man and machine. Now at this point, you may wish to take your full licence. This will of course mean taking the theory test, which includes some basic questions on the highway code, and of course the hazard perception test. With your theory test successfully completed, you can then move on and take the Mod 1. This will seem fairly familiar after the CBT because it involves yet more cone work. And then it's on the road for Mod 2. Again, this is fairly similar to the CBT but expanded somewhat. Successfully complete all the elements and you have a full licence. Well, you've got a full light motorcycle licence, so you're able to ride a 125 motorcycle wherever you want, including the motorway, if that's what you really want to do. Yay, dangerous! Although of course, you can also ride in Europe, and that is a big bonus. The A2 or Standard Motorcycle Licence. This is more like it. 47 horsepower, just over 100 miles an hour, an actual bike. And of course, if you had your full light motorcycle licence for 2 years, you don't need to do the theory test. If not, you probably have to do the CBT and the theory test again, because they probably both run out. So it's another go around the cones, and then it's Mod 1 for another go around the cones yet again, and back on the road for Mod 2 again. Okay, so I bet you're thinking that by now, if you'd taken a test at every level, it would have cost you approximately shitloads of money. And you'd be right, it really does. Ever get the feeling the government doesn't want young people on motorcycles? I do. On the bright side, your choice of motorcycles at A2 is very broad. Most classic bikes, especially British ones, are A2 compatible, and there are a number of very fine A2 purpose-built motorcycles, and yet more machines with a power output of less than 70 kilowatts, around 94 horsepower, can have restrictors fitted to take their power level down to meet the A2 level, although you can't restrict more powerful machines. I can't see any great reason for this, but you can't. But the capabilities of an A2 bike are on another level to that of a 125. You can use it for track days, go touring, and it'll do pretty much any job you'd like to do on any other motorcycle. There will be those who tell you an A2 isn't powerful enough, but they're full of crap. An A2 in the real world is pretty much capable of doing whatever you ask it to. For example, after I'd had a shoulder injury a couple of years back, we toured across Northern Europe 2 up on an A2 bike and found it worked perfectly well. It was no problem whatsoever. The A or Unrestricted Motorcycle Licence. Now it's time to play with the big boys. A kind of torque that can move a small planet and sufficient acceleration to rip your face off. For many people, this is their ultimate end goal. But first of all, you'll need to be 24 for direct access or 21 if you had an A2 licence for more than 2 years. If you haven't, then it's theory test and CBT for you, before moving on to the Mod 1 again, and of course the Mod 2, which for some bizarre reason you have to do all over again, even though you did exactly the same test 2 years earlier on an A2 bike, which weighed exactly the same and felt, well, exactly the same. But that done, you can choose whatever bike you so wish, whether it be large or small. Now don't listen to all the nonsense you hear in the pub. A bigger bike is not necessarily harder to ride than a smaller one. It's a little bit heavier for sure, but there's no mucking around with gears trying to keep the thing spinning. You can just ride the torque curve and become nice and lazy. And you will fairly quickly discover there's only so much power you can actually use on the road, despite what a lot of people might tell you. And that's why superbikes need rider aids. Which is for me why bikes like the SV650 are so brilliant. There's enough power to keep life interesting without having too much excessive power that you're never actually going to use. But there's more than enough power to ensure that you're never going to get troubled by cars, and you can carry 2 people in comfort at a fairly reasonable speed without working too hard. But of course I'm not really the sporty type, so my personal choice is my Big Gutsy. It's reliable, easy to maintain, and offers enough performance for me to tour vast distances in great comfort, with a passenger too. And the great thing about this bike is you can use the torque to ride you out of any situation without needing to muck about with gears and things like that. But if big bikes are your thing, and you have the licence, the world is very much your oyster. Any style of bike is available to you, whether it be normal cruisers, roadsters or sports bikes. All will offer more than enough performance for any sane rider. Assuming you can afford to insure the damn thing, of course. And the eye-watering asking prices that some of these machines go for. I think for me the really annoying part about this whole process is that when I was 17 you could go out, get a 125, pass your test and then ride whatever bike you fancied. And while jumping from a 125 to a mighty Fireblade really does seem like a terrible idea, so some sort of staging process, rather like the 33 horsepower limit that we had a few years ago, which of course lasted for 2 years and then you got whatever bike you wanted, isn't a bad idea at all. But why can't riders with A2 licences just do a day course with the local training centre? Why on earth do they have to go through all that rigmarole of taking the tests again? It's completely unfair in my opinion. And it financially penalises the younger riders, because according to the government, the day you turn 24 you suddenly become a fine upstanding member of the community and very sensible, so you're able to just jump straight onto whatever bike you like, because at 24 apparently you can handle the power better than at 23. And so, having bitched and moaned about the current system, what would I do instead? Personally, I would learn the lessons of the past, because back in the 1950s you could take your test on a 350 Royal Enfield, which in terms of top speed at least, doesn't actually outperform any of the 125s around today. But with that torquey motor it's actually much easier to ride. I would say that something like Royal Enfield's Himalayan would make a far better machine to learn on than any 125 on the market. Why? Because it's torquey, so you don't need to change gear every 5 minutes, so it behaves like a real full-size bike, and its size and weight mean that it's not such a leap to step onto a much larger machine. And bikes such as Royal Enfield's 350 range would be absolutely perfect. Now, I'm not just doing some advertising for Royal Enfield here. Many companies do bikes that would be absolutely perfect for the learner role, but they're not currently allowed to use them because they're over 125. In reality, a capacity-based restriction simply doesn't work. You end up with something you've got to scream and does not behave like a real full-size bike. What is the value of learning to ride on a machine which is very different from the bikes you're going to use when you're past, but also is actually more difficult to ride? And if you're a big bike rider and you don't believe me, just take somebody's little 125 Screamer out for a ride and see how hard work it is. Riding a 125 is about as much fun as an evening with an accountant. The other change that I'd make is if they wanted riders to be in stages and then move from A2 to the A class, why not simply have the schools run a conversion course for a day? This would be much cheaper for cash-strapped young riders, and of course it would free up time at test centres, something which we're told is very limited. But instead what we've got is a system that seems deliberately designed to push people away from motorcycles and onto some god-awful Tesla or something. But you never know, one day common sense may prevail and they may alter the system to something like I've suggested. Do I think this is likely in my lifetime? Not a chance. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.